Thank you all for joining us tonight for our very first Cooking with the Cap Times. I'm Chelsea DeCane-Drobick, the audience strategist here. I'll pass it off to our food editor, Lindsay Christians, in one sec. But first, I want to thank our sponsors for making this video event series possible. Our presenting sponsor for this video series is Sitka Salmon Shares. Premium wild-caught seafood starts with unparalleled values. You can use the code COOKWITHCAP to get $25 off the first month of a premium Sitka seafood share. Visit sitkasalmonshares.com for more info. We'll drop this code and a link in the chat. Our official kitchen sponsor is Kessenix. For over 90 years, Kessenix has provided Madison and Dane County with quality products and outstanding customer service. Stop by their showroom to shop like a chef. You can visit kessenix.com for more info. And we're excited to announce that in future videos, the chefs in this series will cook right in the Kessenix demo kitchen, featuring the latest equipment and technology. And last but not least, our official beer sponsor is Stella Artois, a Belgian brewing tradition since 1366. Thanks to Stella, we're giving away some 12 packs to 4 lucky viewers. There's an entry link that we'll drop in the chat. Click that to enter to win. And at the end of the video, we'll announce 4 winners. Spoiler, you must be 21 or over to win. I also want to thank any Cap Times members for joining us tonight and for your continued support of local journalism and our newsroom. If you're not a member, you can become one at membership.captimes.com. We'll also post that link in the chat. Without further ado, I will now pass it off to Lindsay, who, if you don't mind me saying so, is one of Wisconsin's foremost food writers and critics. Enjoy the event.
Thank you, Chelsea. Look at that beautiful mise, everybody. That's going to be so much fun to dig into tonight. As she said, I am Lindsay Christians. I'm the food editor here at the Cap Times. If you would benefit from closed captioning, I did want to mention that there's an option for that at the bottom of your screen to make this sort of easier to understand if you need that. We're going to be doing some chatting and some cooking tonight. So if you have questions for Evan or for Colton, who's general manager here as well, you can put those in the chat or you can put them in the Q&A. We will find them wherever you put them, and we'll be collecting them sort of offline in a Google Doc, and I will get to as many of them as I can. My goal for this series is to encourage people, including me, to expand our comfort zones when it comes to cooking at home. I also want to introduce readers to chefs that you may not know very well. So to kick this off, I'm going to read a quick bio of tonight's chef, who's going to be on screen here in a second, I think. Evan Dannells was born in Kansas and moved to Madison in 2002 to pursue a culinary career. He's been a sous chef at L'Etoile, co-owner of 4 and 20 Cafe and Bakery, head chef at Merchant, and the opening chef at Lucille. He worked briefly at Pasture and Plenty, and then in 2019, he took over the former Oliver's Public House space. You're seeing the kitchen there right now. He is now majority owner of the French-inspired restaurant Cadre. Knowing Evan professionally, I can tell you he probably works too much, as many chefs do. And thankfully for all of us, he says yes a lot, which is one of the reasons I asked him to kick this off. We are also joined tonight by Colton Shara, Cadre General Manager. He's around to answer some questions as well. So, hi, Evan. I got you right as you were taking a drink. That's perfect.
Yep, sorry. Just working on my Stellas.
I'm
already 1 in and I've got a minimum of 4 to go. I'm told.
See, there you go. I like goals. You got to have goals. So
somebody can keep pace for me.
First of all, I want you to tell us really quick why we're cooking regional French food tonight.
Well, a couple of reasons. First reason is that Cadre is a French-inspired restaurant. We hesitate to make any claims of authenticity, but most of everything that we do at Cadre is inspired by French food. We like to take it to Wisconsin and kind of add our own little take to it. And so that's the major reason. The second reason is it's my favorite, which is good because, you know, I made a restaurant out of it. And so furthermore, the reason that we're doing Bouillabaisse tonight is a lot of France tends to have a lot of very involved multi-day sort of processes for a lot of the things that they make, especially winter food. And so we I wanted to make bouillabaisse because it's a staple at our restaurant, but it's also one of those one pot meals that you can do year round with relative ease.
Nice. You often talk about the quality of the ingredients you get and why that's really important. And I was curious what and where you tend to lean on during the winter in Wisconsin when local produce is not as easily available.
Yeah, well, we have in the food service world, we have access to different tools than a lot of other people do in terms of being able to source products. But our rule in the restaurant for the most part is when it's in season, that is the time that you cook with it. There are exceptions. We put by thousands of pounds of tomatoes this year thanks to COVID.
Nice. Okay.
We were dehydrating and canning and freezing and juicing and doing all sorts of things. And there are some things like that we do to extend seasons, but for the most part, I usually try to work with, specific. Like I don't typically eat asparagus this time of year because that area of late May, early June when it's in season here is so much better than anything you're going to buy at a grocery store. That being said, all grocery stores are not equal, and quality of ingredients. I mean, it is next to impossible to make something, in my opinion, that is good if you don't start with a good foundation, and that means good ingredients. We're on the near west side, so I have a tendency to do a fair amount of my shopping at Metcalf's for things like this. They have a stellar fish and meat counter. They have a really good line. They have lots of good organic ingredients. We were able to take everything that this recipe called for from the bouillabaisse and put it all in a shopping cart, even from their online shopping function, in order to be able to make this tonight. I just wanted to make sure that was something that was possible when we did it. So as a rule, I tend to sort of shy away from a lot of the more like national name brand types of things, and I try to head a little more towards organic. So you'll see that we're using organic tomatoes and a few other things. Organic isn't always a sign of quality, but it typically is a sign of a fair amount more time on the vine for things like tomatoes. So it makes it quite a bit better. And tomatoes are kind of the backbone of this recipe.
Nice. What has Cadre been up to during the pandemic?
Well, I think like a lot of places, there was a moment of scramble where everybody was trying to figure out what the next months and whatnot were going to look like. Most recently, for the last few months, we have been doing kind of a regional tour of France where we pick out individual locations and we do kind of a deep dive into the history and what food traditions are part of that place. And then we've been doing rotating weekly meals where each meal is representative of a very specific location. Nice.
That sounds like fun. It's a way to change it up for you.
It is actually the most fun that we've had during COVID by a long shot. It was the first thing that the first version of us we came to during this where I was like, I'm learning and this is fun. That being said, we are really excited for spring and summer and things to settle down and have a bustling dining room again. But in the meantime, we'll keep doing things this way for now.
Nice. I hear not infrequently from folks in the Midwest that they're nervous about getting ocean fish, which this calls for, obviously. Do you have any thoughts to share about how you source fish and the kind of quality of fish that we can get in the Midwest now?
Absolutely. That is, or really was a legitimate fear. For most of my life, you just went in and bought what the grocery store had, and it was just names of things on packages, and there weren't resources to let you know about where a lot of your products were coming from. That is not the case anymore. There are a whole host of internet resources to let you know about how overfished certain things are and aren't that you can buy at a grocery store. Like for instance, Metcalf's has like the Monterey Bay, like the ratings for the sustainability of all the fish that they have in their case. Our sponsor, Sitka Salmon Shares, sustainably fishes absolutely everything. So they're a viable source if you want to get a fish CSA. I've been there and been on their boats and been in their processing facility and absolutely love it to death. The only reason that I put fish that wasn't necessarily theirs in this recipe was because the whitefish that we're using, not to be confused with the whitefish that you can get from Sitka Salmon Share, because it's kind of a generic term for ocean fish, but not so much in Wisconsin, is something that you can get sustainable and available all over just pretty much any grocery store that sells fish. They're going to have whitefish. That being said, most practices in the United States, so most fish that has been caught in the United States, and emphasis is on wild caught, is pretty sustainable because our country actually does a pretty banging job of making sure that we don't overfish, especially things from Alaska. But if you want to go even one step further, Sitka Salmon Shares is an amazing way to get an education in sort of Alaskan fish. If you were to make this recipe with one of their fish, honestly, they have lingcod, they have sablefish, they have halibut, they have rockfish. I mean, I personally would love to do this with rockfish.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Those are all in there. Those are all options when you use Sitka Salmon Shares. And so I would happily use any of those fish with it. You noticed in the recipe that I said that I usually try to shy away from fish like salmon or trout when making this dish. And it's just quite simply because they have such a strong flavor that it can kind of overwhelm the whole thing. And there are a lot of like subtle aromatics in this. And there's a reason most like chowders and things like that have salmon in them, they have been like cured and smoked. And it's because if you just throw salmon into a pot, everything is going to taste like salmon. So if you wanted to sear a piece of salmon and put it on top of this, absolutely go for it. But I tend to gravitate more towards a more neutral, flaky whitefish for a dish like this.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more when we actually get started cooking, but I ended up using monkfish in mine and it actually turned out
which would be fantastic.
Really nice. Yeah, it was great. Before we actually get started here cooking, for those of us who are going to cook along, obviously I'm not going to cook along, I'm just going to talk. I was wondering if you had like a Paul Hollywood, Mary Berry style word of advice, to send us all off into our kitchens to get started. Wise words.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared. It's just food. As long as somebody doesn't have a shellfish allergy, everybody is going to live through this.
I love it. That's perfect. I did have one person email and say, I would love to do this, but I'm deathly allergic to shellfish. And I thought, well, we're not going to bring it into your house and like attack you with it. So I feel like it's still okay.
In all honesty, Bouillabaisse is one of those things that it as you're traveling around France, you're going to see all sorts of different iterations of this, especially on the coastline. And so you're going to find ones where people put shrimp in it. You're going to find ones where people put salmon in it. You're going to find ones where people put mackerel in it. It's going to be all over the place. And so, or sardines, especially when you get down near the south. Yeah. Or yeah, if you get down too far in the south, there's a lot of African influence to the bouillabaisse down there, and people will typically put harissa in it, as we were
nice.
Informed by one customer once. This isn't how I had it in Marseille.
Oh, gotta love that. It's my favorite thing. I did want you to say really quick what bycatch is, because bycatch was something that I think you mentioned in the original recipe in terms of the fish that you can use. Did some of those things that you just mentioned count as bycatch?
Not really. I wasn't talking about bycatch. Colton might have put a little bit of a thing in there. Bycatch is from when people are net fishing and there are additional fish that are caught. There are a whole lot, depending on where it's coming from, there are a whole lot of sort of like fish that people have recently discovered that are pretty delicious that are part of that. Herring is sort of a bycatch. A lot of those like smaller fish will tend to get caught up when you're fishing for other things. As a rule, I tend to go after things that are typically like longline fish for a lot of this stuff. But there are some decent bycatch fish out there, as long as they're done like they're not trawling like, and it's done sustainably, that you could use for this. The real trick is just doing your homework.
Nice, okay.
It's not that hard to really quick say like, ooh, I'm thinking about working with this fish. I'm going to get on the internet really quick and check the sustainability of this. Google goes straight to good resources for it. So if you say, is halibut sustainable, Google's going to take you right to an accredited database to tell you like what, depending on where you're fishing, where you're getting something from, whether it's good for planet Earth or not.
Nice. Well, hey, let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the recipe said earlier, or as the recipe said, I would usually recommend making the roux for this a day ahead of time. Since we can't do that because I want to show you how to make it, we're going to start the bouillabaisse and then we're going to circle back and make the roux while everything's kind of simmering a little bit. Most French cooking starts with a base of simmering aromatics, and that's very much the case with bouillabaisse. I'm actually pretty happy with how this recipe scaled when we took it down from the gigantic pot that I normally make, because it kind of scaled pretty well into just like whole individual vegetables. In this case, we're going to start with just a little bit of onion, fennel, and garlic. So typically, this is more of like a julienne cut. So what I'll do is I'll take the top and the bottom off of an onion, cut it straight down the middle. That's actually a product of, I got into a fight with a fire door earlier this week and managed to smash my finger really nicely. So the cleaver is the only thing I can use very well right now that doesn't put my finger in an awkward position. But it's not a meat cleaver. It's a vegetable cleaver. So
it might be nice though, like if you had arthritis in your hands, maybe it might be a nice tool to have as well.
It's been a pretty interesting week of trying to figure out how to do this with a smash finger. That was actually one of the first thing that ran through my head after ouch was like, oh great, I have a class in like 2 days. Obviously don't try to do this as fast as I do sometimes with some of these things, but I've got my onion, you've cut the top off, you've cut the bottom off, throw that in your compost bin or whatever have you. So now you've got an onion that you can actually see the layers pointing north and south here. That's the direction that the individual layers of the onion go. So the easiest way to julienne an onion is to take your knife and just literally work your way all the way up and across it from north to south. And that'll give you nice little pieces that are usable for this sort of thing. So I'm going to start my pot here and we're going to kind of just slowly add these things as we go. Grab your olive oil. I really recommend for olive oils when you can going out and getting Bertolli is a really good brand that's in almost every grocery store. If you can get an organic olive oil, it's really nice. It's essentially just a guarantee that it's actually going to have all olives in it. A really, really bad olive oil will lend sort of a metallic flavor to a lot of things that you do with it, and it's pretty horrible. So I try to I tend to err on the bougie side with olive oil most of the time.
I gotta say, Costco has a really good organic one too. Like,
oh, absolutely. I mean, Costco's great. I always get worried about recommending Costco to people because I don't want somebody to go out and be like, I had to buy 5 gallons of olive oil.
I mean, I use it. It never goes bad in my house.
When I cheat, half the shopping in my life just comes from the restaurant. So, so just toss that in with the olive oil on a pretty low setting. We're not trying to get any color or fry on any of the aromatics we're putting in this. We're just trying to get them to sweat and kind of add as much flavor to the pan as we can. So there's all the onion. This is a fennel bulb. I already cut the top off. The top is actually really fun if there's a beautiful frond on top of it. It's a really nice way to use it again as a garnish. It's also edible, a little fibrous, which is why most of the time we use the bulb, which is a little bit sweeter as well because it doesn't have the chlorophyll like the top does. So lop that top off, clean out the outside if it's dirty. cut it again at the bottom. As a vegetable, it's layered in sort of a similar fashion to an onion. So you can see those same lines that go all the way across it. I like to pop the core out just because it's kind of messy. And if you do it really well, you can even take that little bottom piece off, which is also going to be a little tough.
It's harder too, right?
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so, and then it's the same story as the onion, just thin slices all the way across the top. Anybody who's familiar with a mandolin, it is a perfectly viable alternative for this as well. Toss that in.
I'm required to use a metal glove now with my mandolin because I have a bad habit of not paying great attention to what I'm doing.
Oh, they bite the best of us all the time. I got bit by one today. So
did you really? Oh, I feel better.
Oh, I do little thumb nicks all the time. It's always when you tell yourself, like, I can do one more swipe. Garlic. Hopefully everybody knows how to peel a head of garlic, but in this case, I didn't smash it too hard. I love to just crush it with my hands, pull out the individual pieces, take the flat of my knife, smash them on a cutting board, and then pull the skins off. I did this so you didn't have to watch me do it 20 times in a row. So just some thinly sliced garlic. Oh, that hurts. Never mind. Back to the cleaver. I
recently used the bowl trick for peeling garlic. Have you ever done the bowl trick where you just have two bowls and you hold them together and then you shake it really, really hard and the peels come right off the garlic cloves?
No, I haven't. I've seen some weird towel tricks. I know they make a machine.
It kind of works.
Something like that.
Yeah. I feel like I normally now smash my, like when I'm doing this, instead of using a knife to smash because I'm clumsy, I will use like the bottom of a bowl or just anything flat.
Or a pan. Yeah.
Or a pan. Yeah. Just so that I don't like end up stupidly, again, cutting myself on my knife.
I like the stupid human tricks that you can do for a lot of these things that don't involve specialized tools. Just because like there is no limit to the number of kitchen gadgets that you can end up with in your kitchen.
True.
And really just like having a good sharp knife and a decent cutting board and a set of good pots and pans it can get you most of the way there. And I mean, how irritating is it to peel 12 cloves of garlic? Like, do you spend so much of your life doing it that you need a specialized machine for that? That's sort of the question I always ask myself when I'm thinking about buying a new gadget, because I'm just as susceptible as anybody else. Like you see an ad for a thing and you're like, oh God, that's going to save me time. And then you go, wait, but how much time?
Yeah.
How much time are we really talking?
Yeah. I think I had 3 garlic presses for a while and I don't understand how I ended up with 3 of them.
Still like garlic presses. They're pretty neat. That's a nice shortcut to not having to mince, since a lot of people are pretty uncomfortable with it. So we've got all 3 of our aromatics in. I like to be seasoning all the way through cooking most things. So I'm going to sprinkle just a little kosher salt in here right now. We'll save pepper till later. And then just give everything a good stir.
This is going to sound weird to say, but that is one of my favorite smells in the world, of like onions and garlic just sweating in a pan. Like it's one of my favorite things.
Oh, absolutely. Ironically, this is like the beginning of pasta sauce for me right now here too. So that's
can go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to just pop this lid on it for a little bit. There's no reason to lose any of those delicious flavors. So I'm going to just kind of let them steam themselves a little bit. And we're going to move on a little bit to the next step of this. So the next thing that we're going to do right after this happens is we're going to add a little bit of wine. Right after that, we're going to move on to putting tomatoes and fish stock in it. So I like to find a plum tomato when you can, which is they're also called Italian tomatoes sometimes. And the reason that the recipe calls for you to drain off the juice is because depending on the brand, there are differing amounts of juice in a lot of these, and they can be very thick. So for instance, this one that we got has a tomato that's so thick that you can see like it's spreadable almost.
Yeah.
And if I put all of that in this recipe, I'm going to end up with tomato sauce, like just plain, it's going to, well, consistency wise, it's going to end up like tomato sauce. And so I usually drain all the liquid off and then kind of take it from there and add it back based on texture. So the other thing that I do is after I've done that, I go through and just kind of smash the tomatoes a bit inside. They sometimes have a lot of liquid on the inside of them, and they're not gonna, this isn't a stew that's cooked for so long that the tomatoes are gonna break down too much. And so if you don't smash them in the can, you're gonna end up trying to fish them out and smash them with a spoon or something in the pot, messy. And you're going to be really annoyed with yourself. And you don't have to do a ton, just break them up and make sure that they've kind of ruptured, because most of these are peeled and then canned whole. I prefer that because then I can control sort of the tomato ratio as I do this. Because if you get like a crushed tomato or a diced tomato or anything like that, you're going to have a really hard time getting that juice that it's packed in back out.
What happens if I throw that into my little carafe thing for my immersion blender and just go zhuzh, zhuzh, zhuzh?
Yeah, that's what I would do. I'm
fundamentally lazy.
I didn't want to bring any specialized equipment.
No, I get it. Yeah.
In all honesty, if you had to ask just about every chef what 20th, 21st century tool they absolutely cannot live without, I think 9 out of 10 of us are going to say an immersion blender.
I love it. I love it.
I recommend going to an actual big box store, so you don't have to deal with like an Amazon like warranty return policy type of thing. Go into an actual big box store, find the cheapest, most generic brand you can get, buy that $5 warranty, use that thing every day of your life, and know that your $20 immersion blender is covered if you need to replace it. I have gone through more immersion blenders that have ranged from $20 to $220, and they all last 6 months for me.
I feel better with that too. My first one that I got, I ended up just duct taping it together, and I kept it duct taped for like 2 years, I think, until I finally got a new one. I think maybe my mom got me a new one. Thanks, Mom. But I just held it together with duct tape and prayed, and it kind of worked.
Yeah, they break really, really easily. And it's never the motor. It's always like the thing that holds it together, or like the blade gets bent or something terrible like that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing's just ruined still. And so I don't buy expensive ones. I think we have like an Amazon Basics one in our kitchen here at Cadre for like a small one. And I love them. As a matter of fact, we're gonna do the Rui the hard way here in a little bit, simply because I didn't plan to use one in showing people how to do this. Maybe we'll pull it out for a minute. So now you can see that these are pretty nicely, like, they're soft. There's like a little bit of a sheen to them. There's a little bit of translucency of the onions in particular. That's pretty much where I wanted to take it to. So we're gonna move on, and we're gonna put the wine in. In this case, I used like a pretty generic, like Spanish crisp white wine. Anything like that will work pretty nicely for this one. This is mostly being used for its acid. Since we're finishing the Bouillabaisse with Pernod, you're not going to be able to pick out a whole lot of nuance of whatever wine you use. I just think it should be like a pretty crisp one. So for people who like to keep Chardonnay and things like that around, that would work really nicely as well.
I want to say I'm drinking the wine that I used, which is this, it's an Ercole Bianco, which it's like a liter. It's like $13, and I got it at Table Wine. Highly recommend. I don't know if the grape is Monferrato or something like that. It was an Italian grape I hadn't heard of, but crisp, light, delicious, and you get it by the liter. So it's my
Well, I
kind of wine.
was going to show off a bottle of wine and drink that while we were doing this. And then we got sponsored. Stella. I don't always drink beer, but when I drink beer with Bouillabaisse, it's Stella Artois.
Look at that. You're natural.
So the wine doesn't need to hang out very long. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. I've been thinking about that all day. So the wine doesn't need to cook down very far. You can already tell that just from the starches in the alliums and the fennel that they like soaked up the wine right away, and this is already like got a viscosity that's definitely more than wine in the bottom of the pan. So that's good. That's all we need. So now I recommend adding your fish broth, which I made awkward. Now this is one of those things when I make Bouillabaisse myself for the restaurant, or I was making it at home, I like to make a fish fumet. Stocks are kind of the base of pretty much every French recipe. That being said, I know everybody doesn't have time for it. So when you go to get a broth of some sort to do this, I recommend going and trying to find something that when you turn around the ingredients label, it says like water and a couple kinds of fish, and then like the kinds of vegetables that you would normally put in a stock, and just kind of leaves it at that. If you really like bouillon, I think you and I had a conversation about this earlier, better than bouillon.
I love that stuff.
Especially the low sodium ones is a good alternative for this sort of thing. Because if you don't get the low sodium ones, oftentimes you can sort of accidentally over season your food with the base that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got our alliums, wine, stock. We're going to throw the tomatoes in right now. And then the way that I essentially judge how long this takes to cook is the amount of time that it takes to cook the potatoes. So that's what we'll move on to next. And then as that's simmering, we'll make the rouille. So we've got all that in the pot. This is another good opportunity. See, I didn't crush that one. There's a whole tomato floating around in there. Oh, and I'm going to throw about half of that liquid back in, because I do want this to be red and I do want it to have like a good tomatoey flavor. Don't worry yourself that it's kind of orangey right now when you're used to seeing something that's a little bit more red. Some changes will happen as we go. So I'm going to cover that, and we're going to move on to the potatoes really quickly. Potatoes, just your standard red potato from the grocery store.
Nice.
I like to give them a really good scrub, check them for eyes. Red potatoes, for some reason, have a tendency to come a little dirtier than most other potatoes. And so I really like to give them a good wash. Otherwise, you might end up with an earthy flavor, which we like to say comes from dirt in your soup, which is not very good. So for these, I like to cut them into medallions. So you just want to kind of head for something that's, about as thick as your pinky, maybe even a little less, depending on the speed with which you want to do this. And there's not much to that. This is another great job for a mandolin. I could actually, somebody want to pass me a mandolin really quick? I'll show one really quick, but I'm not responsible for any injuries that happen.
Oh,
to
please.
anyone.
I mean, I don't want to go viral for the wrong reans. Do not sacrifice yourself.
So this is a Behringer mandolin, or Behringer rather. It's a Japanese brand of mandolin that every chef has had in their knife roll at some point. They're a really, really handy kitchen tool. The blades can be removed and sharpened. They work like crazy. They last forever. They even made like a newer model the last few years that has like a better way of adjusting like the thickness. So you go through and adjust the thickness on the bottom, and then take your potato and you can just run it right across the top. It comes with a nice guard that
triggering.
you use to protect your hands. See, she's scared already.
I thought I just
and that's all you need to do. I'm not gonna wow you with tricks of how fast we can do
I think
that.
I did use my mandolin for this, actually. Like, now that I'm watching you do it, I think I did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all up to your comfort level with that. I was just trying to avoid specialized equipment. So just keep tossing the potatoes in as you go.
Liz Henry says that you need to get your chainmail glove, and I agree. I agree with this.
Oh,
Extra
that's a
protection.
that's a whole lot of work, though. I'm saying this, and I'm like, I have a huge bandage on my finger while we're doing all of this. It was a door, I swear. Which isn't that much better. Apparently, I didn't know how to open doors or shut them.
I do want to ask, and this is something that people can put in the chat if you want. It's basically a question for my audience, our audience here. I want to know what your cooking deal breakers are. Like, for example, mine is if a recipe says moving quickly, I just put that recipe away. I will not make that recipe. If a recipe says they want me to push it through a sieve, I don't like pushing stuff through sieves. I don't want to do that recipe. So while we're mixing things and stirring things here, if you have any cooking deal breakers, please.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the internet for recipes, my deal breaker is having to read a novel before I get down to the recipe.
Oh, I will defend that to the death.
If there are 25 pictures of how you made the recipe before you get to the recipe for me, I have already moved on.
Well, like, do you know why those are there?
Well, why are they on top? That's what I want to know.
I mean, okay, that's fair. They could probably put them on the bottom. But no, the reason they're there is so that blogger can make some money with ads.
Yeah, I know, and I hate it. And so that's essentially my deal breaker. There isn't, nothing really comes to mind right off the top of my head that people will put in recipes where I say like that's too hard or I don't want to deal with that. I tend to kind of go straight to the ingredients, and if I see something that I'm not super in love with right away, like they're working with if the recipe for some beautiful thing with cheese sauce calls for somebody to pull a packet of cheese powder out of the Kraft macaroni and cheese or something like that, I'll just be like, okay, and moving on. I saw there was one on TikTok the other day where I saw a woman boil Flamin' Hot Cheetos to make Flamin' Hot mac and cheese. It was pretty much the most horrible thing I've ever seen.
Oh, that sounds really good. My mom won't make anything that has anchovies in it, and I'm calling her out because I know she's here right now. And she'll see something with anchovies, and I don't know, like, if she'll make the whole recipe and just leave the anchovies out sometimes. But I'm like, you can't taste them once they're in there. It's just a little bit more salty. Yeah.
Also, all anchovies are not created equal. So,
right. True. It's my crusade.
For instance, I love boquerones, which are the Spanish white anchovy. I mean, I could just eat those as a snack. And so I tend to use those a lot. Otherwise, if you go into a store, Roland, which is like a European importer, they've got a really good paste that lasts forever. That kind of hits. I mean, they're just, anchovies are kind of like the European umami bomb.
Right. Yes. I love it. Like miso, except for, yeah.
Made out of just straight fish.
Fish sauce.
So we've got our pot going. I downgraded to a smaller pot earlier because I was like, ooh, this is going to be close.
Really full.
And now I have pushed it to the limit. So now is a good time to throw in your bay leaf.
Where'd you get a fresh one?
Pinch. We bought that at Metcalf's. I mean, I always have them around the restaurant as well. They were in those slightly overpriced herb aisles where you got to pay like $3 for the little clamshell of herbs. I don't really know anybody who grows them locally around here, sadly. We get ours from Golden Produce, which a lot of people don't know is perfectly available to the public. So you can always call them up and say, hey, would you sell me some fresh bay leaves? And they will happily do it.
Oh, heck yeah. We had a
What's that? Nope, no butter. I probably because they're seeing this little bit of sheen on the top. That's actually the olive oil with the starches from the allium just kind of floating on top.
nice. That is such a full pot. That makes me feel
Yeah,
anxious.
it'll be fine. The alternative is that we go into something that we had to use the camera to get like halfway down, and I didn't like that as much. So we'll pay good attention. So now we're throwing
counting
in the
threads?
saffron threads. Not
Yeah,
really. I probably put a couple too many in. It's fine. Saffron is one of my favorite flavors in the entire world, so I don't really care when I'm a little heavy-handed with it. I prefer Spanish saffron when you have a chance, but Penzeys spices is the way to go to get things like that if you want to make sure that they're absolutely high quality, plus they're pretty cool people. Which is another nice thing about sort of the near west side like shopping extravaganza for these nice things is you can hit Metcalf's, Penzeys spices, Vom Fass all in a row, so you can get fancy oils and vinegars and good spices and pretty high quality groceries all in the same area, which I like a lot.
I got my Pernod at Steve's, so shout out to Steve's on University.
Oh, and Steve's. I forgot to
Yeah.
shout out Steve's, which is
I love those guys.
where I would get Pernod for the
Yeah.
restaurant if we were allowed to buy retail alcohol. So
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
yeah, we have to order in our alcohol that we cook with, which occasionally is frustrating depending on what it is. But so we're starting to simmer a little bit, as you can see, and just because I have this pot so overloaded, I'm going to turn it down just a shred. I like that I'm stressing you out a little bit, Lindsay.
It's okay.
So really quickly, we're going to move on to the Rui. Now, Rui is, I've seen different versions of it all over the place, but essentially what it is just an excruciatingly garlicky aioli. I've seen recipes for it where it's kind of broken, where it was never really put together. And that's fine too. I've seen ones where people put breadcrumbs in it. At the end of the day, the importance of the Rui to making bouillabaisse is it's a pretty high acid food with a lot of shellfish. So it has a lot of inherent sharpness. And so it's nice to have like something fatty and garlicky to kind of cut it, because it's still a stew. So it's going to have a little bit of a homogeneous flavor. You're not going to pick out a lot of nuance between one bite and the next. And so I really like to always have like a crunchy piece of bread with like fatty aioli to dip into it, or even to mix into it, to kind of mix things up a little bit. So the way that I would recommend making this is to initially start with garlic. I am going to have to look for 2 seconds to remind myself. I just said a head of garlic, which is a little deceiving because it can mean a lot. When I say that, I mean something that was probably about this size. It's usually like 8 to 10 cloves. If you're, you can go into a lot of places and you'll find elephant garlic. I probably wouldn't put a whole head of that in. If you really like garlic, go crazy as you want. If garlic really isn't your jam, especially raw garlic, absolutely roast your garlic ahead of time for this, and it'll mellow it out quite a bit. Typically for garlic roasting, I don't even bother to do the oven trick. I'll just take some olive oil, throw it in the smallest pan I have, cut the clove of garlic in half, invert it, stick a lid on it, and kind of boil it in oil for half an hour.
Nice.
And you'll get to pretty much the same place.
I love that. That's a pro tip. That's great.
Because you're not really worried about texture at that point. So you're just trying to soften up the garlic. So back to smashing. Just give it the old palm.
I took a head of garlic apart and I counted the cloves because we cut this recipe in half for the broth and the fish. And then I made a quarter of the roux because Patrick, my husband, doesn't love mayonnaise. I wish I had not cut the roux in four. I would have done fine with a half and just taken care of it myself because it was so good, even right away. When I made it a day ahead of when I made the broth.
Yeah, and you know, the real reason that I tell people that it's best to make it a day ahead of time is just because of the saffron.
Yeah.
I'll teach you a little bit of a cheater trick if you're in a hurry. While I'm doing this, if you want to hurry your saffron up just a little bit, take your lemon. I'm doing the cheater juicing trick. So take your lemon, fish out your seeds if you can. Sometimes they'll still come back to haunt you. Take a fork, stick it on the inside because we don't all have juicers, and then squeeze, and at the same time just move your fork up and down.
That's awesome.
And that's a nice cheater at home way to get sort of maximum juice out of your lemon. And this was a really seedy one, so it ended up with a ton in the bowl, which is not a big deal, because if you have more than one bowl, you can just turn around, put your fork in, and it will hold seeds in your bowl.
Look at that. That's amazing. That's like the thing that I would do if I was like up at a cabin in the north and they don't have as good of a kitchen as I thought maybe they would, and I'm stuck. Because I love my juicer, but I don't always remember to bring it.
Well, and you're a cocktail person, so you like to juice. A lot of people just don't have anything, so I like to try to make these as low impact as possible when I'm teaching folks about these. Plus, it's just one. I don't know if I want to, clean my juicer for that. So we've got our garlic almost all the way done here. If you have a garlic press, now is a great time to use it. Just smash that garlic into something that's tiny. If not, we'll just chop it up really quick. So now to speed up the saffron or to speed up the roux just a little bit, if you put your saffron in the lemon juice, you can see the color change like instantly because the acid is going to pull the oils out of the saffron, and that'll speed things up a little bit. But you'll even notice after you make the roux that the next day there'll be little pockets of color where your saffron threads are because they'll continue to extract.
I saw that. I for sure saw that. This reminds me a little bit of when you're doing like a risotto with saffron in it. You put a little bit of the hot broth of the broth you're using for the risotto, and you put a little bit of that in the saffron to like bloom it, kind of, I guess.
Yep. And so I tend to bloom mine in acid when I'm doing things like this. And so it'll get to the same effect. It's a bit slower. I don't want to cook the lemon juice because that would mellow it more than I want it to be.
Right.
So now I'm just chopping this garlic up, however small your tolerances for eating raw garlic. That's why I said the garlic press is kind of your friend with this one because it'll just crush the heck out of it. This is not how I usually use a cleaver, by the way, folks.
It works great.
Yeah. It's taking about 4 times as long as it usually takes me to chop something like this, but
better that than long-term finger injury. You do need your hands.
Gray sea salt.
Thank you, Colton.
Yeah, Colton just pointed out that somebody had asked if you could use gray sea salt instead of kosher. Absolutely. Go crazy with whatever kind of sea salt you like. A lot of the stronger sea salts, you've just got to be a little bit careful. They can tend to add flavors that may not be what you're after in the long run. Like smoked sea salts and things like that. They just don't always have like the greatest, or like Himalayan pink salt, which everybody was so into for a really long time, has a sort of a minerality that I'm not sure I would want to chase on a dish like this. Salt is salt at the end of the day. If you've got a kind of salt that if you're comfortable with it and you like it, you should stick with it. One of the great chef debates is always is always Malden versus Diamond Crystal. Like, which is your kosher salt? And it's a personal preference thing. Like, I've worked with both professionally in kitchens, and I tend to use Diamond because when I take a pinch of it out of a bowl, I know exactly what it's going to do. And so with salt, yeah, absolutely. I always love sea salt. It's not something people always want to pay for. But if you're into salt and you like playing with salt, like, yeah, use the sea salt. Absolutely. I love Maldon. That's like my personal favorite in terms of like a pretty readily accessible salt.
The flaky sea salt. Yeah, I love that stuff. I'm
the only
obsessed with it.
place I'm positive you can buy it in town is Jenny Street Market. Wisconsin Cutlery sells it, I'm told, which is on that same strip mall that's got all the good stuff near us.
Yeah. The last chef thing we did, I was saying how I had to order Diamond Crystal off of the internet, but you don't have to. I think it's available. It's available locally. Penzies has it, I believe.
I've seen Diamond Crystal in a lot of grocery stores. It just they tend to sell it in the tube rather than the box.
Yeah. I like the box.
So it's a little more hidden. So we've got our 3 threads of saffron kicking around in there, and our garlic and our lemon juice. Then put our 5 drops of sriracha. Ooh, that was a big drop.
It's like with bitters.
Yeah,
big drop of bitters
sriracha,
makes a big difference.
Sriracha is another one of those things like I don't skimp on. You got to get the real stuff from Hoi Fong Foods. I think they haven't raised their price in like 25 years. It's already going to be the cheapest. When you're passing through the organic section and you're like, ooh, I should get this organic sriracha. Don't do it. It's not right. It's like when you tell yourself that you're going to make ketchup at home and it's going to taste just as good as the Heinz that you grew up on. It's not going to work. It's a trick.
I do sometimes make my own mayonnaise, but I've realized you can't make a small batch of mayonnaise. You have to only make a big batch, because if you try to make a small batch with your immersion blender, it doesn't work. Turns out.
Absolutely. So we've got that in there too. And then take your mayonnaise. I already pre-measured myself out a cup. Again, not all mayonnaises are created equal. I'm going to shamelessly plug my favorite, which is Duke's mayonnaise, which I think was already on the questions you told me you were going to ask earlier. So Duke's mayonnaise is something that's actually gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, despite the fact that they've been around for over 100 years. They are, it's just a real mayonnaise. It's a mayonnaise that's made out of the same things that you would make a mayonnaise out of at home. They put a tiny little bit of preservatives in it to extend the shelf life, but it's not a powdered processed egg product binding oil together. It's actually like a good quality soybean oil with real egg yolks, water, vinegar, salt, making something that actually has different flavors you can pick out of it. You know, Hellmann's still has its place. If I was gonna whip up a tiny batch of something that had like a whole lot of flavor in it, like something flavored that I was making, absolutely don't buy the more expensive mayonnaise that tastes like lemon and vinegar and eggs. Like, just use Hellmann's. But if you want mayonnaise, like, you know, I used a cup of this and now I've got, 26 ounces of it left that has to get used for something. It'll probably be sandwiches, and I'd rather have my mayonnaise taste good for the other things that I use it for as well. I
used Kewpie and I got a pass.
Oh yes, absolutely. Kewpie mayo is great.
Yeah.
But the 2 reasons that Kewpie mayo is great is, 1, it's made out of really high quality soybean oil again. Really, really high quality oils are a thing that a lot of people don't understand is really important to flavor. One of the things Ed turned me on to earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, was sort of a heritage canola oil. Vom Foss sells it. It's called Sun Meadow oil.
Nice.
And it tastes like movie theater popcorn butter. but it's
Oh, I miss
100% vegetable based. It's so good. If you have the opportunity, stop in there and ask them about it. It will change your life. We always have a bottle of that around. So then just take your mayonnaise, toss her in, and then give it a good stir, and you're pretty much done. I put parsley in there as sort of an optional thing, and that's just because, you know, it's pretty plain looking, and fresh parsley tastes amazing. So I tend to put parsley in. I like to use flat leaf parsley, like most chefs do, for this sort of thing. It's just a little finer and a little less waxy than like the Italian or the curly parsley that you'll see in a lot of stores. So this sort of white color, although we're in a light that makes it look even a little whiter, but you can see how these saffron threads stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow, when I pull this out, it'll have these great big, like bright yellow pockets, and the saffron flavor will have about doubled. So that's why I asked for this to be made ahead of time.
Is there a substitute for saffron if you're just not able to like drop the dollars?
I honestly no, not really, because you're already gonna have to get it. You're gonna want it for the bouillabaisse. If it's not your bag, I mean, this little container of Spanish saffron that we got, like just because we wanted to go to the grocery store and see how much it costs to make all of this, it costs $5, and
okay, so there you go.
It would make many batches of both of these things. So, and another pro tip for you: when you're not using your saffron, store it in your freezer.
Really? Why?
Yeah. Because you know, even everybody's best pantry in their home kitchen is fluctuating 10 degrees and 20% humidity over and over again, and saffron's one of those ingredients you don't use all that often, and it has almost no water content. So when you store it in your freezer, it's going to protect it from a lot of those temperature and humidity changes.
Nice.
Which is what makes spices go stale.
The more you know. I store my popcorn blend in my freezer, which is a herb blend, and it's to keep it good for very long periods of time between when I go to Ohio. So I do keep some things in there to keep them longer. Ooh, look at that. That's gorgeous.
See, it's bubbling, and I'm not even making a mess yet. So just keep that simmering for a little bit. Potatoes are still pretty crunchy, but this is like the perfect amount of simmer. Just a little bit of bubbles around the outside. You know, give it the occasional stir just to make sure things aren't sticking on the bottom. But for the most part, that's letting you know that, you know, water is a really good at transferring heat. So unless you have a burner that's just all kinds of lopsided, if you're simmering on one edge of your pan, the chances are most of the pot is pretty close to the same temperature if there's a fair amount of liquid in it.
Mm. So you mentioned fish fumet earlier. Is there a way to sort of do that quickly yourself at home using like shrimp shells and things like that? Or
absolutely. I don't usually use shrimp shells just because that's more of a shellfish stock.
Okay.
But if you go to your average grocery store that sells fish, if you ask them if they have any bones, there's a relatively high probability that they might have something back there. I love using neutral fish like a halibut for a stock.
Okay.
Or if you can get collars, although they're a little bit more expensive and kind of unnecessary. So I'll usually use halibut, and I just buy a halibut. They call them frames, a halibut frame, and I just throw it into a pot with mirepoix, so carrots, celery, and onion, maybe a little bit of fennel, an orange or two, pour in a little bit of wine, bay leaf, peppercorn, thyme, throw it in a pot, fill it up with water, and then simmer it for about 45 minutes.
Nice.
So your average chicken stock takes like 6 hours. Your average beef stock or pork stock takes like 12 hours. Fish fumet and vegetable stock, I don't ever typically simmer those for more than about 45 minutes just because they've already pulled everything that you need out, and you're just going to reinforce flavors you don't want to have. Like bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of which, notice that the bay leaf went into the pot, but I haven't put thyme in this yet. I am a big proponent of not adding fresh herbs to any sort of soup until the final stages of the cooking process, for that same reason that I don't want to boil a stock that has fish or vegetables in it for a very long time. Most of the flavor from herbs is carried in the natural oils that are in the leaves. And once you've pulled that, there's really nothing else for it to do. So if you throw your fresh herbs in too early in the cooking process for something, there's a chance that you're going to break it down more than you need to. And then you're going to start getting bitterness from like the fibers of the things that hold the plant together, as opposed to the oils that are in the leaves.
Ah, okay.
So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. So if anybody has any questions, it'll be just like a sort of a few minutes till the next step.
So when I made this the other night, my husband Patrick and I were talking about like whether or not this is an ambitious recipe. And I said no, because I didn't think that there was a ton of like capital T technique, right? Like there's some stuff that you have to do, but it's not like, again, like no moving quickly, no pushing through a sieve. But he said it was because some of the ingredients are not pantry staples for a lot of folks, and because the ingredient list is kind of long, and because you do more than like put everything in a pot or on a pan and make it cook and then you're done. Like with it, which I think is like most simplified recipes, where you're just like prep the things, put them in the heat, and then take them away from the heat and you have cooked, right?
I mean, I think you could easily argue that we are maybe getting slightly overly descriptive about like why we do a lot of the things that we do, but I think that's kind of the fun of a lot of these things, is like chefs put a lot of thought into every step of everything that we make, because you know, I don't just make this once, I have to make this 1,000 times.
Right.
And so little variations will make big differences, and we want people to come back and eat something that tastes the same every time. If you just threw this all in a pot, like all these ingredients in a pot, and kind of winged it, would you turn out with something good? Probably most of the time. But if it wasn't good, you wouldn't know why. So that's kind of why we in the cooking world have a tendency to make things pretty complicated in terms of like reasoning for all the different stages that we add to this. It's not super necessary. You could probably throw this whole thing in your crock pot, and as long as you didn't boil the potatoes to death, you're going to turn out with something that's going to be pretty good.
Nice.
But if you follow everything, you're going to end up with something that, you know, with relative confidence, I can say will turn out the best that it can for you. So I think we are getting to a place that I'm pretty happy with for the potatoes.
Nice.
So a little bit dribbling over the edge. So the potatoes should, at this point in time, this might be a little south of it, but it's not a big deal, should be at the point where you could take a fork and just kind of like with no resistance, just the weight of your hands, go through it. If that's at that point, it's a great place for this, because you're still going to just leave it on and keep it doing its thing. And you're not going to end up with something that breaks apart when you're serving this.
Right. Yeah.
So once I've gotten to the point where I've got all the vegetables where I want it, that's when I'm going to add the final of my aromatic ingredients for this. So in this case, it's fresh thyme, which for any of you who haven't cleaned this before, the easiest way to do it is just to take the individual stems off of it and then run your finger the direction that it grows, and it'll pull off the little pieces. The stem, it's not going to hurt you, but it's not necessarily tasty. It's pretty tedious to get a lot of this. So just pick it until you got a nice little pile, and then give it a tiny little chop. And if there's a little stem, nobody's going to hate you for it. I've already got the amount that we needed pre-measured, so no one has to watch me do that.
Look at that. Just like on TV.
That's preparation. Good luck, Lauren. Hard act to follow. Then the Sriracha. Now, this is another one of those ingredients that I like a little punch to my bouillabaisse, so I tend to be a little heavy-handed with it. A tablespoon might be a bit more than people want. This is by no means a spicy dish. So I don't think a tablespoon into this quantity that we've given you the recipe for is going to put it at a heat level that makes anyone uncomfortable. But it's also not something bad that it's not something that'll be bad if it is spicy either. So you can always be a little more heavy-handed with that than you want. This is sort of the substitute for something like harissa that takes it more to that like Southern coastal French feel. I just like Sriracha because it's a round and it's a flavor that marries really well with other things. And so it's that way you don't have to go out and get like a special tube of harissa paste or something like that just to make a single soup. Then we're going to add the Pernod almost all the time. Look, it's nice and absentee neon in there.
It's so bright.
When I'm cooking with liquor, somebody might ask, like, is the alcohol going to cook out of this? The answer is no. Very little of the alcohol will cook out of this in the amount of time that we're going to allow this to be in it. That being said, this is 1.5 gallons of soup, and it's got 2 shots of alcohol in it. It's your kids will be fine. The earlier and longer you put alcohol in something, the more you waste. Because as it cooks off, you're going to lose flavor. And so I tend to finish a lot of things with raw alcohol and just let them cook for just a very short while to marry. So add that as well. And then we're pretty much done with the base of the bouillabaisse at this point. It's good to just sit there hot on your stove. If you were doing this ahead of time because you were entertaining, this would be a really good point to just turn it down super low so it's not simmering or cooking anymore, and just push it to the back of your stove and wait for people to show up.
Love it. I can't wait to entertain again someday.
Somebody asked how long to store saffron in the cupboard. I'm assuming we already have some.
Saffron in a cupboard. So like with a lot of spices, the longer that you keep something, sort of the weaker it gets. Your saffron won't go bad per se in the cupboard. It's just going to get to a point where you need to add more to get the same amount of flavor. So the answer to that question is sorry, I should have said it out loud, is how long does saffron keep in your cupboard? The answer is probably a pretty canned, like 6 months, which is usually what people say about most spices. But again, it's about diminishing returns. The older it gets, the weaker it's going to be. You'll still be able to coax saffron flavor out of it indefinitely. You just might want to be a little more heavy-handed if it's been in your cupboard for a long time.
The older it gets, the weaker it's gonna be. Makes me think of ibuprofen, which is not the same. Mom, your saffron's probably too old, but I'll smell it the next time I'm home. I am so glad that pot is still like it's a champion right now. Like it's hanging on, and I'm really impressed. I did want to know from Colton if he had any ideas for cocktails to use with Pernod, but he can answer that if you're moving on to the next bit. Because if you've got a bottle of Pernod around,
yeah, I can have it. I think I have to get the invitation from Chris.
Oh, somebody's gonna have to turn Colton's audio on. He'd be happy to.
Oh, I can.
Oh, yeah, I guess I can. There we go. We can get my video. Hello.
Hi. Tell us how to use this extra Pernod that we have.
Yeah. So Pernod was originally invented as a replacement for absinthe, which like after the turn of like around 1905, I believe, they made absinthe illegal because it was assumed that it could make you go crazy. That's not true in hindsight. But anyway, so Pernod was invented as a replacement for absinthe. It's very like black licorice forward. And how you can use it? Can you use it in a cocktail? You can use it in place of absinthe. So if you have a classic cocktail recipe like a Sazerac that has just a rinse of absinthe in the glass, you can use Pernod. What somebody saying? Otherwise, like, how would you drink it in France? In southern France, you would get a little pour of pastis in a little glass, and you would have it at your table. And then typically at the table, they would have a little pitcher with ice water, and then you just pour the ice water into the glass with the Pernod and kind of dilute it so that it's like, think of like diluting it down to the strength of like wine, and that way you can sip it. And the interesting thing about Pernod or pastis is that when you pour water into it, it turns like a purple milky color, and that's because inside of it is anethol, which is that black licorice flavor, and it's an oil. It's still in the liquor. So yeah, how would you drink it? You drink it maybe with a little bit of water, a little sweetened. A cocktail that I found while doing some research about cocktails in Marseille was something called the Mamazette. Ooh. And the Mamazette, it means little mummy. I'm not sure why. But the Mamazette is a pour of Pernod with a little bit of orgeat, which is sweetened almond milk, more or less. It's an almond syrup. And then you add soda water to it. And it's this very interesting, refreshing, kind of like sweet, nutty, creamy black licorice flavored cocktail, which I think for folks that hate black licorice, like you're just not going to be about it. But for some of us that love black licorice, like that's awesome. And then, I mean, also the thing is like that black licorice flavor pops up in so many different ingredients. It's based off of star anise. So if you use star anise in the kitchen, that's like the primary flavor for pastis. Yeah. So that's
nice.
how I would drink it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
One more. So try making a Moscow Mule and throw in pastis. It seems so weird, but it ends up tasting like candied ginger.
No, I'm here for that. That sounds delicious. All right. Thank you. Evan, I'm going to unmute you. There was some weird echo. There we go.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Look at that. All right. So you're gonna help me be less afraid of cooking mussels, because before this, I had cooked them maybe twice. And one of the times I was like, that was real bad and I don't want to do this again. So, but these ones came out pretty well. Although I will say, like, I thought they were better the next day. Weirdly.
Interesting.
The cooked mussels, they were cooked, and I like warmed it up for my lunch and like just threw them at the very end to warm up. And it was great because they were already cooked.
That's interesting. I tend to not like really recommend that for people too much, simply because when they overcook, they're so rubbery.
Yeah, I didn't overcook them, but
well, no, I just mean on the reheat. It's it's really, really easy to take them over the edge. So now we just need to get around to cooking our fish for this. I tend to do that separately. So another tip for you is like, you could always make the base for your bouillabaisse, pun sort of intended. You could make that a day ahead of time and then just have your shellfish to like reheat the whole thing gently and do it the next day. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that's really important is that you cook the fish ahead of time, or cook the fish sort of a la minute for this. There's really not much to it. So we have Prince Edward Island mussels. They're the most common kind of mussel. You can find them in almost every grocery store. I take them, get them, they're usually compact in ice. Check them, see, they'll sometimes have like this little thing called a beard that's like a little bit of sort of vegetable matter hanging out.
Saw that on mine, yeah.
Yank that out ahead of time. When you do that though, the clock has started, you have angered them and they will die. So all of these are alive. Bivalves are really cool. They're always farmed nowadays, which is sort of a bad word in the fish world, but they're sort of the things that help keep the coasts clean. And so oysters and mussels and clams, the practices that are used to farm them are actually pretty great. So I love using them because they're very, very sustainable. Anybody that's farming them is literally cleaning the water in where they are. So you take it, pull the beards out, throw them in a container with salted ice water, and let them, what we call purge, which is they may have little bits of sand or something like that that's in them, and they will get rid of it. if you put them in that, or at least most of it. Clams are notorious for being sandy.
Yes.
So I absolutely cannot emphasize doing that enough with those. If you have a bunch of either kind of shellfish and they're open, there's one quick, easy way to check them. I don't really have a good example right now because these are all in really good shape. But if you see one that's open, this one's just open a crack, take it, give them a little knock, set it off to the side. If they don't close most of the way again, like if they haven't noticeably moved in about a minute, it's dead and you don't want to cook with it. There will always be a little bit of attrition the longer you store these. Usually when you buy these at the store, as long as you keep them on ice, they'll be good for the better part of a week. But sometimes when you get them in a store, they've already been out of the water for a week or two. They're super hardy. And mussels in particular are notorious for telling their buddies when they're not feeling very good. And one will decide that life has been too hard and he's going to call it quits, and then he tells all his buddies, and then you've got mass mussel death on your hands.
Oh my God.
They're bivalves. There are plants that are way more complicated than these things. So don't feel too bad for them.
We get
Clams
oysters.
take a lot longer to cook than mussels. Mussels
Okay.
only take a couple of minutes. So I recommend starting with clams when you do this. So all I do with this is grab a pan or a pot, something that you like, that you got a lid that fits nice and tight on, and get it going pretty good. There's no reason to be shy if you do this relatively quickly.
Moving quickly. There it is.
Moving quickly.
Good Lord.
Give it just a dash of oil just to stop things from sticking.
Look at that. So Evan, you know how you made things with Vitruvian earlier last year?
Still doing it.
Yeah. I bought a chorizo cheese dip and I had it in my freezer and I heated it up for our little like 4-person New Year's Eve. I had our little other couple in our pot over and I heated it up in a fondue pot and we dipped some chips in it and we were like, is this butter? This is butter. I served my friends the cider butter, I think, with herbs.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
that
I
would
served
probably
butter.
have been cider rosemary butter.
Yeah. And I could not figure out what it was because I thought it was the cheese. It wasn't though. It was delicious. And I refrigerated it and I used it on other stuff. But oops.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's
That's
okay.
it's a little shocking when you want cheese. So notice how the oil's starting to smoke. That's a pretty good point, that letting you know that your oil's hot enough to do this. I like to kind of just have my fish shred in this, so I tend to just add the fish with the clams. I don't really care if I boil it pretty hard. So this is whitefish. It's readily available at all grocery stores. Usually comes from Lake Superior, and it's got a pretty good shelf life. It's got a nice neutral flavor, and it's from around here, which is fun.
Chef hands. I use tongs for that. My goodness.
So get your fish in there. Try not to crowd it too badly, and let get them in there until everything starts to want to shimmy around a little bit, which means your pan's heating back up because you dropped a bunch of cold stuff in it. Then drop your purged clams in. Now, clams are a lot more forgiving than mussels too. So, get back in there. And so I tend to just get my clams all the way cooked before I even worry about my mussels. So then.
Oh, look at that.
Give it 3-4 dashes.
Nice.
slap a lid on it, and then we're gonna wait a couple of minutes.
I did the ice water bath thing with the salt and everything, and I didn't know why I was doing it. I probably could have.
So yeah,
Googled, but I
that's
didn't
just
know
to get
why.
them to purge.
Yeah.
Also with mussels, like they don't need to purge quite as badly, but it'll make them a little happier before you before you shuffle on their mortal coil. You know, they don't like being dry, and they're used to being in salt water. And so if you throw them in water that's not salted, it actually they can't breathe it, and it upsets them. And when they get upset, they die, and then they tell their buddies to die, and we've already been over that. So
Yeah. I did end up having to use clams that were cooked because it was all that I could find at the co-op the other day. And I was really nervous about that. I was like, oh, it's not going to be good. But I put them in at the very, very end just to heat up, and then I pulled it. Like, so basically I
that's
tried not
actually
to
a
cook them at
fantastic
all.
idea.
Just to warm them and then right away. And they were fine. They were really good, actually.
You know, I'm always shocked at how scared people are. So those are usually just steamed lightly, like just enough to make them safe. Most grocery stores, I saw these when I was at Metcalf's shopping for this the other day, was in their freezer section right next to their fresh fish. They had bags of steamed mussels and clams all put together, ready for you.
Nice.
I can't tell you that they're going to be, 100% as good, but if steaming shellfish is something that gives you anxiety, by all means, go grab those, because this dish has a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that having the shellfish be 100% perfect is the most important thing in the world to it.
Yeah.
Now, when you're cooking clams and mussels, the nice part is they're pretty easy to tell when it's done. When they're open all the way, they're telling you we're done. So, and if they don't open ever, then you throw them away. But all of these are opening nicely. They look good. They just all popped open. So I'm going to turn around and do the same thing. It's probably a little more mussel than we need.
Look at all those. Goodness.
Yeah, my guys are going to eat well tonight. I've got a whole crew back here rooting me on and heckling me in equal measure. So they'll they at least know dinner's taken care of.
Awesome. That looks beautiful, actually.
So pop the lid back on that, and we're probably 3-4 minutes out from being completely done.
I think I might
This would
have
be a good time if you had it to break out your bread.
Oh, yeah.
And cut yourself off some nice slices.
That's Clausen's.
This is Clausen's.
I can
we
tell
went
by
to
the
go
look.
buy our Madison sourdough bread, which I'm pretty devout about.
Mm-hmm.
And they were out. And all I have was miche, which is my favorite bread, but not exactly analogous to baguette. So
we ended up with batch. I love batches baguettes, but they have this epi, that's like leaves. Mm-hmm. I love that. And the scalli.
No, epi is fantastic.
Yeah.
You're just watching me throw a little bit of parsley.
Oh, all right.
Which is on the recipe for the bouillabaisse as well. I just tossing that in at the last second too. It's really more in there for color, more than anything flavor specific in this particular recipe. And I'm gonna cheat. Restaurant trick: always have a quart of parsley. We used to call that like the emerald trick, where you like watch someone cook something and you could tell that it's just a hot mess, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, but this is how it should look, and then they just put the beautiful thing up that someone else made a long time ago. Sorry, Emerald.
Bam. You need a catchphrase. You need a catch line.
Let's see. And now all of our mussels are open. So we are in good shape. This is done.
And they're like really open, right? They're not just a little bit. I feel like I pulled mine too soon.
If they're just cracked, a nice way to do it, sorry, chef hands again, is if you poke them and there's bounce back, but not too much bounce back, like they bounce back a little bit, but they don't feel rubbery, they're cooked. So I honestly wouldn't worry too much about it. You're not going to give yourself shellfish poisoning from something that's opened up all the way, as long as it's, you know, been taken care of ahead of time and you made sure you didn't cook a dead one. That's how people get sick. So, and it's also incredibly rare. Yeah, I was just gonna grab one bowl. Don't we have a couple up there?
I'll run and grab one, Chef.
Oh, Colton's gonna get me a bowl in a little bit, or in a second here, and I'm gonna show you guys how I plate this. But
Nice.
This is pretty much done. So, and the clams, unfortunately, this is a problem I always have with clams. They like to escape. Mussels have a tendency to stay in the shell pretty nicely, but clams, they try to flee eventually. So if you've got somebody who's like a huge fan of clams, you may have to fish for it a little bit to find a couple of the clams when you're done doing a batch this size.
But it's rewarding.
Yeah, it's like bobbing for apples, only murder based. And here, actually, if you get a close up of this really quick, you can even see how the saffron is starting to already bleed out into this, and it'll be like 20 times that by tomorrow.
That is so good, and I wish I didn't know how good it was.
Yeah, mayonnaise is just really not good for you. At its root, nobody's getting skinnier with a mayonnaise-based diet.
It's really good. Even just I did it two ways. I put it on the bread and had it like with the bouillabaisse, and then sometimes I would just like dollop some in, and they are both great. Recommend both. It's very good.
So if I was feeding a crowd, I would line up a whole series of bowls across here and just kind of dig in. The fish is going to be at the bottom, obviously. So you want to make sure people get a good amount of that. And just kind of dig in there and get yourself a nice spread of a whole bunch of different things. This recipe, do we put a serving?
8.
No, I mean, 8. This is pretty solid. I think this could feed 8 people very, very easily. And when we went and shopped, we just did it for the sake of exercise. This is maybe a little over portion for 8. But when we shopped for this, the whole thing cost right around $100. So that means you've managed to make dinner for 8 at what, like $15 a person roughly. And that's not bad. So then take your broth and vegetables, just kind of spoon it over the top, give yourself a little bit of extra broth. Then I usually like to stick my baguette on and get a little sloppy with the roux and just kind of drape it over, and you can do a little bit of mixing it in and do a little bit of mixing it in and dipping your bread and whatever you like as you sort of fish things out. Also, another pro tip, when people eat at a restaurant, we tend to give people bowls to put their shellfish shells in. Your guests will appreciate it once you explain what it's there for.
That's beautiful.
That's all she wrote. I'm not going to make anybody watch me eat on camera. So
that's some people's pet peeve. So I appreciate that. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody got anything to ask before we wrap up here? God, that's beautiful. All right.
And that's, another thing, that's what I was talking about fennel frond earlier. I didn't have any on me because this time of year when you're using fennel, oftentimes it doesn't come with fronds just because it's been out of the ground for a while. Fennel's pretty sellable. But if you're already buying a bunch of flat leaf parsley, never a bad idea to stick a little bit in the center just to kind of break up the colors a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and add a little bit of green to the dish. Did we have any questions rolling in?
A lot of thank yous.
I
Well-
am just jumping on quick to announce our 4 beer winners and thank our sponsors once more. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Chef. That was really awesome. And I loved reading everyone's words. Without our sponsors, we could never make this video event series happen. So we want to thank again our presenting sponsor, Sitka Salmon Shares. We want to thank our official kitchen sponsor, Kessenix, and of course, our official beer sponsor, Stella Artois. Thank you guys so much for helping make this happen. Our 4 winners, thank you guys for registering to win a 12-pack of Stella. The winners are Sue Center, Barbara Hughes, Rachel Robillard, and Ginny White. So we will pass those emails along, and I think Colton's gonna reach out to organize pickups for those delicious Stella beers. And that's all from me for now. Lindsay, do you wanna wrap up?
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Evan. Thank you, Don, the cameraman.
My pleasure.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
shout out to
Colton.
Don over here. I don't think he's gonna turn the camera around, but Don makes me look prettier than I should, and everything that we do here at Cadre look a lot prettier than it should. So if you want to look him up, I think he's on Instagram as Don Crossland.
Don Crossland Photography, and then you can also visit his website, zenzinodesign.com. Or actually, it might have a different ending. Yeah. Anyway, you can always reach out to us on our website. Don designed our website, cadrerestaurant.com. He does all the photos for Instagram, so definitely want to give him a shout out.
Nice. And they can find you at Cadre Restaurant in lots of different places, right?
Yep, cadrerestaurant.com, at Cadre Madison on Instagram. We're never going to get a Snapchat, I don't think. Probably not a TikTok account. Yeah, probably not a Twitter either. I think hopefully that's over. I don't know.
It might be at this point.
Yeah. I do want to say too, for anybody out there that's interested in learning more about what we're doing at any given moment, you should go to our website, scroll to the bottom of the landing page, and we have a newsletter you can sign up for. When you sign up for the newsletter, you get other recipes like this that we've done. We have a little digital cookbook. And so you can learn more about that. Plus that gets you signed up so that you can see some of the takeouts that we're doing. We'll share more recipes and just, hopefully at some point we're thinking about maybe doing like a blog or something like that. But stay tuned. We want to talk to you about food.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, our next event is coming up March 24th. It's going to be Lauren Montalbano. She is a vegan chef. She's a hoot. She's a lot of fun. She just shared with me today what her recipe is going to be, but that will be coming out very soon. We'll have some more information about that. I've got chefs booked out for the next several months, but we have a plan for the year. And basically, y'all, I'm just going to be honest. It's just people that I like. I think these are cool people that do great work and are awesome. So I'm just choosing people that I think are fabulous and either whose work I already love or whose work I'm curious about and want to know more about. So very scientific process as always. So thank you everyone for coming and just, have a great night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you everybody for coming.
I think